Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Social Chrysalis Roundtable. Tonight's topic is When God Was a Woman. So we're very much looking forward to this and looking forward to our faculty member, Sharon Maloney, sharing this with you. So Social Chrysalis is about conscious evolution. And, there's much teaching, sharing, that we want to talk about, how we constantly, evolve, consciously by choice, not by chance. So one way we do that is, of course, interacting with people like these roundtables. And this is what we want you to do here with us tonight as well, is to interact. So make sure you put comments in the chat, make sure you raise your hand and we'll call you in to talk. Very much looking forward to that, but please interact. That's what it's all about. So at this time, I'm going to ask one of our faculty members to introduce our presenter. And everyone, you saw him with his wife on our last month's roundtable, sharing about creative aging. And of course, you can find their program out at socialchrysalis.com. So let's welcome Walter Drew, everyone. Walter.
Thank you very much, Robert. So let me tell you about Sharon Maloney. She is a passionate woman. She's passionate about her family, her husband, her children, her friends, about her personal conscious evolution. But most of all, she's passionate about female power and the sacred female body. She's passionate about women claiming their rightful roles. Although men and women couple and have to couple in order to procreate, Sharon has opened my eyes to the major role the female plays in that process. The man's role is rather minuscule compared to what the female goes through during her entire lifetime. And it's my great pleasure to introduce an exemplar of female power, Sharon Maloney.
What a beautiful introduction. Thank you, Walter. So I'm going to invite us all to just take a few deep breaths because my heart is just bursting at the moment and I need to get some oxygen into my lungs. So let's take 3 deep breaths together. Just begin to drop into this space, this time, this moment. Another deep breath. And then one more together. And just give ourselves permission to arrive here into this space, to spend the time together. And I would like in turn to introduce my fellow Social Chrysalis colleagues who are part of this panel this evening and this morning here in Australia. So we have Robert, who opened the process. We have Walter, who's just introduced me. We have Barbara, who's the beloved of Walter. We have Rebecca, and we have Leanne. And these beautiful people also have programs on the Social Chrysalis platform that are well worth visiting and considering. So how the process is going to go today is that I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you with some slides that I've prepared. And I was just sharing with my friends here how excited I've been in doing this preparation. It's like, wow, it's totally blown my mind. Again, it's not new information for me, although some of it, there's new little snippets that have come in, but my whole body was just lighting up as I was revisiting these times before patriarchy when God was a woman. And something's been going on. It's like my evolutionary potential inside me has been activated. And so I want to share that with you because it's very likely that your evolutionary potential can be activated through what I'm about to share with you. So the process is going to be that I'll share my screen shortly and we'll start to go through some of the slides that I've created. And then we're going to take a pause. And so it's not just an academic exercise, I'm going to do a guided meditation with a little bit of background music. So you have a chance for your imagination to actually visit what I'm talking about and be there in person and get a feel for what it's like. And then after the meditation, we'll have a little roundtable discussion amongst the panel. And then at the end of that process, I'll go back and share some more slides, and then the same process again, a little meditation and then another discussion and so on. So it's not, just to let you know at the outset, it's not just going to be me talking at you. I want you to participate in this so that you gain the maximum benefit. Okay, so I'll just share my screen now. Jump into my PowerPoint. So this is obviously the topic, when God was a woman, picking up the dropped thread of gender equality. And I'm calling it the dropped thread because we have actually had the experience in our history as a species of being in a partnership model of equality around gender. And that's what I'm so excited about and what I want to share with you today. So why this topic? Well, we have this perception that patriarchy is normal and that it's always been this way. And it's simply not true. We've got a long prehistory before the patriarchy when our lives as human beings were quite different and gender was quite different. And that needs to be known because it's not taught. We have a very obvious imbalance of masculine and feminine energies on our planet that urgently needs rectifying. We've only got to look around us at relationships, at our relationship with the earth, at the imbalance that's really right up in our grill at this time. And so that urgently needs to be rectified. And this is my way of contributing to that. And then the other piece is that my life mission, I know that what I'm here to do on the planet is to restore the sacredness of the female body. I've known that for a very long time, and it's becoming more imperative for me to do that now. So this is my way of being able to do that. So let's go back in time to pre-patriarchy. What was life like before the patriarchy, and how I came to explore this domain was during my PhD when I was looking at the female body. So my thesis is titled Female Biology is Sacred. And my own experience of my body is that it's sacred. My body processes have been sacred to me. Not always easy, but certainly a portal to the divine. And yet I don't see that reflected around me in my culture. And so when I was doing my PhD, I was like, well, how did this come about? And was there something else? And when I started looking and investigating, this whole world began to open up for me. So what I found was that so patriarchy began historically around 4,300 BCE. And before that time, the archaeological evidence shows that the earliest European and Middle Eastern cultures were a balanced, non-patriarchal and non-matriarchal social system. There's this preponderance of female figurines and artifacts that overwhelmingly shows that in the beginning, God was a woman. So we have these ancient Paleolithic goddess figures. There's the Venus of Willendorf from Austria, 30,000 BCE, the Venus of Dolny, 26,000 BCE, and the Earth Mother of La Salle, France, 20,000 BCE. That's a long time ago. And these are not just little cult kind of figurines. These are actually representations of the deity. The archaeological and mythological sources show this widespread veneration of the goddess as creator, lawmaker of the universe, prophetess, provider of human destinies, inventor, healer, hunter, and valiant leader. And so the worship of the goddess was this it's not just that it was a religion, and it'll become more apparent as we go on. This is a way of life. It's not just something they do on the weekend. This is their way of life, the worship of the goddess. And it spans a huge geographical area and time span of some 30,000 years. So I just want to look at this timeline here. And you can see up here in top right, this is where we are now. The green part of this timeline is how long patriarchy has been around. And then this yellow goes all the way back. This is the limit of the page of the book that I've copied it out of. It only goes back as far as 17,500 BCE, but we know, you can see down here bottom left, we know that the Venus of Willendorf, for example, was dated from 30,000 BCE. So you've got another whole section of this timeline that goes right back to then. So you can see for how little time patriarchy has actually been the social organizing system of the human species. It's, you know, Charlene Spretnak talks about this as the lost weekend of patriarchy. And when you see it on the timeline like that, it kind of puts it into context. It's actually only fairly recent, and yet I don't know about you, but I have had this kind of myth that, well, this is just how it's always been. No, it's not so. It's actually been quite different. How we know this, at least part of how we know this, is through this amazing woman, Maria Gimbutas, who was the professor of archaeology at the University of California. And she was one of those amazing women who pulled together so many different threads so that her archaeology and investigation was informed by much more than just her discipline. So she directed some of the major excavations of Neolithic European sites, examined over 2,000 artifacts, and she also deciphered the ideogram scripts of Neolithic Europe. So there were 4 scripts discovered in unearthing this material. And her interdisciplinary scholarship, she pulled together, she was a mythologist, a linguist, she studied comparative religions. So she brought all of that together. So it gave her work around archaeology such a depth and richness that many of her colleagues didn't have. And so she says the archaeological materials aren't mute. They speak their own language, and they need to be used for the great source they are, to help unravel the spirituality of those of our ancestors who predate the Indo-Europeans by many thousands of years. She's this amazing woman, really, like a trailblazer in her day. So in the beginnings of agriculture in Neolithic Europe, there was this flourishing of well-organized goddess-worshipping societies that venerated the earth as her living body. And they were matrilineal societies, so descent came through the female line. And the archaeological evidence shows that it was largely a peaceful existence, with this flowering of art and culture and architecture around 5000 BCE. I think we kind of have this mythology that was always violent and, you know, warlike and so on. Well, the evidence actually doesn't support that. Our pre-patriarchal goddess symbols reveal our predecessors' awe at the great miracle of our human condition, the miracle of birth incarnated in woman's body. There's widespread use of red ochre as a menstrual symbol. Menstruation was regarded as sacred, and female figurines that emphasize their bellies, their breasts, their vulva and buttocks, or the female parts, show how these essential parts of the female body were endowed with the miraculous power of procreation. So it's hard for us to imagine what that would have been like, what a woman would have felt like back in that time, embodying those things. And so I was curious about this. What's the social significance of this veneration of women's bodies? What impact did it have? And here's where we dive into Crete. So Crete, this is ancient Crete. This is 3000 to 1500 BCE, before the Common Era. It's really the high point of goddess culture. And so we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into this aspect of goddess culture. So you can see it's this little island in the middle of the Mediterranean. And at the turn of the 20th century, a technologically advanced, socially complex culture was unearthed on the island of Crete. And it was described by the archaeologists at the time as a bombshell, completely blew their minds. They just couldn't make sense of it. How could such a highly developed civilization have existed so long ago? And the diagram there is the artist's depiction of the palace based on the archaeological site. This is some examples. This is some of the artwork at the top there. And on the left, you can see the Minoan snake goddess with the snakes in her hand and her body, her breasts exposed. This is going to be something that I'll share a little bit later on as part of their sacred attire. This is an example of the ideogram script. And they had these exceptional artworks. This is, don't forget, this is like nearly 4,000 years old, some of these artworks, and this is what's been excavated and uncovered in the form of thrones and frescoes, their pottery, beautiful colour. At some of their walls, you can see how lively, and even now after all this time, how much movement and beauty and colour is present. And so Leonard Woolley, who's an art historian, made the statement that it's the most complete acceptance in Crete, the most complete acceptance of the grace of life that the world has ever known. I kind of have to agree with him. It's so beautiful. So the female deity meant that women's bodies and sexuality were seen as sacred, vital and powerful. They were an intrinsic part of everyday life. Women held prominent public offices. So in these murals and artwork, they're most commonly seen in the public sphere, governing, managing resources, serving as priestesses. And their authority is described as an actualization power that's modelled on the mother-child relationship. So sometimes, you know, some of the critics, particularly of Maria Gimbutas, have said, well, if it wasn't patriarchal, it must have been matriarchal, so women lording it over men. It's actually not borne out by this archaeological evidence or the ideogram scripts. And so the authority that's talked about in these sources is that women's power is one of care. So actualization power, what does that mean? A mother-child relationship, those of you who are mothers will recognise this, you want your child to flourish, right? You want your child, in the normal train of things, you want your child to flourish, to become more of who they are, to be actualised. That is the model of authority that women were embodying at that time, according to the sources. And I just think that's so inspiring. So they were matrilineal, agrarian communities. They lived a social order, apparently without class or sexual hierarchy. So when they look at the homes, you know, there's palaces, there's also ordinary people's homes. They don't find any signs of poverty, which is rather remarkable. And so there's been this equitable distribution of resources, and they had plenty of resources. Partnership model where women and female traits were highly valued but not dominant of men. They worked together. And wonderfully, there's this notable absence of any evidence of war, violence or male domination. I just think, wow, how amazing. You know, think of the world that we live in and the war and the violence. And the tough things that we witness daily on our TVs and around us. Notable absence of those things from this era. Okay, so I want us to dive into our first meditation. So I really invite you to let your imagination take you on the journey. You've seen the images, you've heard what I've been sharing, so I'm going to invite you to take the journey. So let me get myself set up here. Take the journey in your imagination to be on that island, and you can either close your eyes or let them be softly focused. And allow your imagination to draw you into this landscape from so long ago as an act of remembering, so that you can bring it into the here and now. So give your imagination free rein, picture it in detail. There are vast multi-storied palaces, villas, farms, populous, well-organized cities, harbours, networks of roads crossing the land from end to end, organised places of worship, planned burial grounds. Artworks of exceptional beauty abound everywhere, in the form of frescoes on walls and thrones, on sculptures, vases and carvings. There's beautiful pottery, jewellery, metallurgy and engraving. The architecture includes waterways, drains, sanitary fittings, viaducts and fountains. Aesthetic beauty is created within and around the buildings, with beautiful, well-designed gardens and excellent use of natural light. There is large-scale irrigation with crops, stock breeding, fishing, beekeeping, and winemaking. None of the homes show signs of poverty, so there's an equitable sharing of resources and wealth. Religious ceremonies, which happen often, include processions with skilled acrobats, beautiful music, singing, dancing, feasting. And these are celebrated in palace shrines, in open-air sanctuaries, mountain tops, caves. The focus: to invoke the power of the goddess, to bring well-being to the whole community. Every aspect of life is pervaded by an ardent faith in the goddess, nature, the source of all creation. Shrines of one kind or another are so numerous that there is reason to believe that not only every palace, but every private house was put to some such use. Wherever you turn, pillars and symbols remind one of the presence of the great goddess. She is there. There is no separation between secular and sacred. religion, worship is life. Life is an ongoing devotion to the sacred, to nature, to the goddess. So I invite you to come back when you're ready, and I'll stop my share and mute the music. I just go there. In my mind's eye, I'm already there, living there. So I would love to hear from you in the panel. What came alive for you in the meditation or in what I shared previously in the slides? What did you see or feel or notice? What rememberings might you have had? Love to hear your thoughts. Yes, Barbara.
Whoa. What I was experiencing was just this incredible sense of graciousness and people standing tall and proud. And I was so struck, Sharon, when you talked about that the energy there, or the social model, political model, whatever it was like a mother and child, which is so different from male-dominated, war, success, all of that. And it was this, that everyone, everything, all the people, all the crops, no matter what your status, that everyone was honored and respected. And I could feel myself just standing in my own power of tall and gracious and quiet inside. As I looked over, the lands and everything, the water was flowing. There wasn't any lack. Nobody was suppressed. Nobody was cringing. Nobody was worried. I mean, I'm sure there must have been some level of something like that, but that's not what you painted, and that's not what I felt. And oh my gosh, I want to be there too. I'll join you.
Yes. Thank you, Barbara. Yes.
I totally agree with Barbara. It was sublime. I felt as if I went, like who I am now in this life, to Crete with you, right? And just the difference of, I hate to use the word oppression, but to be a woman now, there's places we go, we're not safe. I was just telling somebody, I've been traveling all over the country and I've not felt comfortable going and hiking in beautiful national parks by myself. And so walking there, it was just this safety and really this admiration and honoring just of the fact that I was a woman, and that to be seen, I was seen as the goddess, because I was female. So yeah, it just felt so good and so so lovely. I will be returning there in meditation again. Thank you. I didn't know about any of this, so this is all new information. Thank
Yes,
you.
wonderful. Thank you, Leanne. And it's so true. The safety, that's what I felt in there as well. The safety to be female in all my fullness. Yeah.
Right. That's beautiful.
Yeah, Sharon, what I was experiencing was great. I love how you took us through this. And what I was experiencing is, in Crete, everything is beautiful, right? And it's amazing because of the feminine, the goddess bringing it all in. And what's interesting is that I felt like there's no limits. Let's say if a woman is talking about how they want to make something more beautiful, or just do whatever. A man wasn't there saying, well, but you got to think about this, you got to think about that, bringing in all the logic, right? And
Right.
it was created then. Right?
Yes.
That was really amazing and beautiful. So there was not this seriousness, right? There was just a celebration of life. And I think that's, where you mentioned there was no separation between secular and sacred. And I can feel that. That's exactly how we should be living. So I love it. It was great. Thank you.
The beautiful thing about this for me is that we've done it. We've done it. We've actually, you know, it's not this dream that's in the future. We have lived this as human beings. And so that's why I get so excited, because it's in our DNA somewhere, the knowledge, the deep knowing that we have lived this way. So, you know, it's not a pipe dream. It's a reality that did happen. And yes, you know, they would have had their share of things like disease and famine, and, you know, they had incredible earthquakes in that part of the world. So I'm sure they didn't have antibiotics to be real about it. They would have had a tough life, but they knew how to live, and they knew how to live in partnership and peacefully and with abundance for all.
Yes.
So,
Loved it.
yeah. Great.
I
Thank you.
also felt like it brought us back, but it also gave us a vision for what it can be. And so we can just hold that for what we're creating right now. I believe what you mentioned was really the original blueprint for what humanity was supposed to be, living with a connection to our source and not feeling the scarcity, not feeling the fear, but really creating through love and creating through our own individual lens. So all individualism was honored versus trying to be homogeneous like we are now, that everybody's got to do the same thing. So there were no weirdos out there because everybody's uniqueness was so valued. And then nature was just so supportive, and just being in nature, like when we get in nature now, we understand what we're really supposed to be. So just no parasitism like we are now. It's just everybody's creating their own energy and not feeling like they need to take it from someone else. So
Right.
that's what came in for
Right.
me.
And the inclusivity is what comes through to me. You know, there isn't this stratification. We're all in it together.
I think your point about we don't have to invent something new. This is already imprinted in our DNA. And what I found myself thinking, what you were describing is what I would envision as peace in the world.
Yes.
Generous sharing of resources and everybody being respected and without a hierarchy. I don't know how they went about the decision-making process. I found myself occasionally, you know, having a little bit of a, well, how did they keep themselves together? Well,
it's a good question. I would love to know
they
too,
did.
because they did, and they did it for a long period of time. 1,500 years is a long period of time, while, you know, the rest of their surroundings was gradually succumbing to the patriarchy. So yes. Okay, so let's keep going, and we're going to go deeper into Crete and deeper into their sexual difference and their sexual relationships. So let me share my screen again. So the relations between women and men, there was this open appreciation of sexual difference that is evident in their clothing. So the clothing frequently showed bare-breasted style of dress for women. And, you know, this is the top picture here. When I went looking for this, I saw it in the literature, and then I went looking. There's picture after picture after picture, and like, oh my goodness. And most of those pictures of bare-breasted women look like they're in ceremony. So it may not have been their ordinary everyday dress. And there's lots of pictures of women in, you know, full dress regalia and robes and so on, beautiful robes. But ceremonially, it looks like they're often bare-breasted. And that image of the goddess, which I'll come back to shortly, also, she's the snake goddess. She's also bare-breasted. So there's a connection there with her as the deity, exemplifying that. And then for the men, there's skimpy clothes that emphasize their genitals with these loincloths or waist kind of garments. So it seems to be that there's this free expression of sensuality and sexuality that is, because it's seen as sacred, it's safe, it's so radical and so different to what we've kind of grown up understanding. So here you can see these beautiful bare-breasted style of dress. It's on it's on picture after picture after picture if you go looking for it. For the women, for the men, there are these loincloths. So it's clearly a sex-positive culture that celebrates human sexuality. And I'm also thinking about the inclusivity of that too. I imagine that same-sex relationships would have been just as acceptable as heterosexual relationships because everybody's included, sexuality is welcome and expressed. I couldn't find any direct references to that, but it seems like a pretty safe assumption that in a place where sexuality and inclusivity are the values, that would be the case. There's this peaceful, harmonious spirit of cooperation between women and men, and most importantly, the integration of sexuality with religious worship. And that's epitomized in this sacred bull ceremony. So I'm just going to read you this little description of it. In Crete, for the last time in recorded European and Middle Eastern history, there existed a spirit of harmony between women and men as joyful and equal participants in life. This partnership and zest for life is most vividly illustrated in the sacred bull leaping ceremony, where young women and men entrusted their lives to each other. The bull symbolizes the male principle, the horns representing masculine power as well as the power of nature. And so playing in teams, women and men took turns to grasp the horns of a running bull and somersault over its back. So these would have been like our, I imagine, Olympic athletes, really highly skilled people who they weren't kind of, what do you call it? They were professionals to do this, highly skilled. To do this safely, they needed to work closely together and to align with the movements and the spirit of the bull, showing great respect for this magnificent living creature. These carefully executed maneuvers combined excitement, great skill, and religious ardor. So remember, this is not just a kind of entertainment, it's part of their religious ceremonial process. And so Maria Gimbutas says, a male divinity in the shape of a young man or male animal appears to affirm and strengthen the forces of the creative and active female. Neither is subordinate to the other. By complementing one another, their power is doubled. So just contemplate that for a moment. By complementing one another, their power is doubled. So these pre-patriarchal archaeological discoveries reveal a long period of peace and prosperity when our social, technological and cultural evolution moved upwards many thousands of years, when all the basic technologies on which civilization is built were developed in societies that were not male dominant, violent or hierarchic. And so I'm going to invite you into another meditation now. I just need to find my music once again. So let your eyes close or go into a soft gaze. And I invite you to picture yourself again in that time and place, in that warm Mediterranean climate, the beauty of nature incorporated into the architecture. See yourself dressed a certain way, perhaps in the clothing style of the time. Feel in your body the safety that comes from a cultural space that loves and honors and reveres human sexuality. female and male as sacred. A culture that worships a female deity, the goddess, whose body is the earth. Feel what it's like as a woman in your body to experience the safety, the beauty, the high regard that comes to you from a society that honors femaleness as sacred. Feel what it's like to know that menstruation and birth giving are seen as embodying the goddess, the giver of all life. Where birthing occurs inside the temple precincts, in specially designed chambers, sacramental. As a man, feel in your body the safety and beauty and mutual respect of being in service to and partnership with the divine feminine, the goddess, and her representatives, women. See and experience yourself as a woman in public office, graceful, lively, uninhibited, bringing your full self to the table, confident in your authority, distributing resources, grain, wine, honey. See and experience being a man, athletic, joyful, virile, willingly in service to the goddess and the community. Look around you and notice the prosperity, the plenty, the fruits of the earth. Remember what it was like to live in sensual harmony, mutuality, joyful celebration of sexual difference and diversity. Remember when God was a woman. So I'll invite you back again now. I'm going to stop my share and I'll pause the music. And even though it's hard to come back, I'm going to invite you back again into the here and now, and again would love to hear your experience, what you saw, what you noticed, what you remembered.
Well, I will just say what I felt. It felt
Wonderful.
very evolved from where we are now. It's just remarkable. What happened to us as a humanity?
Yes. Yes, Leanne, and you know, we have, I think evolution goes in spirals. We have this perception that it's linear, but you know, I think it goes in spirals. And my sense of being in that reality is that it was highly evolved. And it teaches us what's possible. We've needed to do this spiral to come where we are now, but it's also there inside us. That knowledge is there inside us as our lived experience. And I'm thinking, dreaming, holding it as our destination, as our next step in the spiral. So thank you for bringing that in.
Yeah, it's interesting, Sharon. You know, every time when you start out doing this, I kept going back that I was a woman then, right? So it was really neat in many ways, and you can feel the empowerment, you know, quite a bit. And it actually, brought forward even another level of appreciation here and now, being in the male body, right? To be able to realize, or at least seem to realize, that that's real, that I was a woman back then. So it's really cool. Very good. Love it.
That's awesome. Insider perspective, Robert.
Exactly.
Great. Yeah, Barbara.
One thing that I was experiencing was, sorry, I think this is deep stuff, Sharon. Thank you.
Yes, it is diesel, and your tears are welcome, Barbara.
All my life, and I don't know about you other women, but I wouldn't be surprised. On so many levels, I have felt like an object to be dominated, or to be captured, or to be something like a trophy or something. Until I met Walter. Well, no, I was fortunate. I had some good, relationships, but that sense of like that I was a body, and that all those other qualities, when you said, picture yourself in government, in leadership, in so many different things, that I remember being in college and thinking, they're not seeing me. They're not even back then, I didn't feel like I was being seen as a total person. And there I had felt this experience of, even bare-breasted and men, the way they were, it was this appreciation for the total person. And so you could interact and you could look at anyone, like you said, Sharon, another woman, a man, but it wasn't like an object of something that I had to have, or when you came together, it was just like two strong equal forces, complete beings. So that was wonderful.
Yeah, beautiful. We're so well articulated, Barbara. So well articulated. Yeah. Yeah, and I also, in addition to the excitement that I felt when I was preparing these slides, I also dived into a profound grief. Like exactly what you're talking about, that for many women, it's the case that we don't feel safe and our bodies aren't revered. And there's so much grief inside us about that, because it's heartbreaking not to be able to show up in our fullness of our beauty and our sexuality and all the capacities that we have out from our heart, right? So that's real. That grief is real, and it sits alongside the knowing of what's possible. I really want to validate that for you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to keep going. I'll share my screen again because I have some more slides that I want to share. This is to the grief that I'm speaking about. Here we go. So the demise of the goddess and all this beauty and the beginnings of patriarchy date to the era 4300 to 2800 BCE. And there were 3 waves during that period. It's quite a long period of time. So there were 3 waves of hostile nomadic tribes with horses and lethal weapons that migrated from the Volga Basin in South Russia and also from the southern deserts. And who knows why? It could have been scarcity of food or different climatic conditions, but for whatever reason they came. Led by patriarchal chieftains, the invaders wrought large-scale violence and destruction on these peaceful agrarian communities who were largely unarmed, deposed the goddess and imposed their sky gods who ruled from the heavens like despots. The gender change, so this is no longer the great goddess who's been here for like however many 25,000 years by this time. The gender change for the deity then legitimized the imposition of a different social order based on male dominance, and the goddess was reduced to a lewd, depraved figure associated with the unpredictability of nature and unbridled female sexuality. So the supplanting of the goddess and replacing of her and demolition really of all her sacred sites and that way of life, because it wasn't just a religion, it was a way of life, by male monotheism and patriarchy had profound repercussions for us as a species. Because how gender relations are perceived impacts not only our everyday lives, but also how our institutions are run, our values, and importantly, the direction of our cultural evolution, whether it will be peaceful or warlike. And what we know from that period of time, long period of history, was that we lived in peace and harmony. We did. So the evidence shows that the original direction in the mainstream of our cultural evolution was towards partnership. And so the overthrow of that by this sword-wielding dominator model was really a cataclysmic turning point. So we're really at this evolutionary crossroads now. All societies are patterned on either a dominator model or a partnership model with some variations. And so our current social justice, our feminist, our climate change, environment movement, new economics, and our spirituality movements, plus this, we're having really a groundswell of sustainable technologies, which we need. I see all of those as examples of the shift, cultural shift from a dominator model that we know now doesn't work to this partnership model, which does. It's actually what we need to survive. And I see that as our species evolutionary impulse towards co-creation. So we're right in the thick of that transition now. Really important to remember that remnants of these pre-patriarchal goddess cultures continued into the present time. So we have Indigenous societies, some Eastern traditions, and of course in the Psychian dreams of men and women. So from pre-patriarchal times right through to now, that divine feminine has always been there and always been honoured. And I'm just quickly going to go through some examples. So there's in Australian Aboriginal culture, there's sacred women's business. Sex differences are seen as akin to right and left hands, physically and functionally different, but without hierarchy. And bear in mind that Australian Indigenous culture is one of the oldest living cultures on the planet. Some dates go back as far as 120,000 years. In the Navajo, we have the female deity of changing woman, daughter of Mother Earth and Father Sky, and their Canalda ceremony, which I studied in depth during my research. It was like an elaborate 5-day ceremony in which the whole tribe participated. So this is her first menstruation. That ceremony, she's understood to become changing woman, the custodian of the sacred and the relationship between, you know, human, plant, animal, human world is all kind of understood to be what she's participating in becoming woman. And then in Eastern traditions, so in Assam, India, they still have matrilineal communities where the monsoon rain, I don't know if you've been to India, but when the monsoon rain hits the red earth there, it looks like red flow. It's seen as the menstruation of the goddess. And so they have this festival, Ambubachi festival, where both the earth body and the female body processes are represented as profoundly sacred. So these are 3 threads that have come through from that ancient time to now, where this is still the case. Peggy Reeves did a study on 156 tribal societies, and so she found that those that honoured the sacred female lived in a reciprocal relationship with nature. Violence and rape were rare. Those with no sacred female saw nature as hostile and unpredictable, and violence and rape were common. So for me, this was like the nail in the coffin about this whole issue. When the female body is honoured, the earth body is treated respectfully. And female body is a microcosm of the earth body. They are one and the same. So why is it imperative that masculine and feminine energies be balanced? Well, it's pretty evident from what we've just been looking at. By contrast, After 6,000 years of male dominance, there's been an enormous amount of human suffering, inequity and oppression, not just for women, but for men as well. Like, to hold somebody down, you have to be held down inside yourself. These are intra-psychic energies as well, male and female, yin yang, right? We have that polarity inside us. And so when there's male dominance externally, it means a man loses some part of his humanity to be co-opted into that. Then we have the bigger picture: environmental damage, species extinction, climate change. From my perspective, they all reflect the imbalance of masculine and feminine energies. And after the last two centuries of industrialization, we have such an erosion of our biosphere and now the major life support systems of our planet. We are on an edge here. So this quote by Thomas Berry, I think, captures it well. As human beings, we now in large measure determine the earth process that once determined us. So we could say that the earth that controlled itself directly in the former period, for example, back in the time of ancient Crete, now to an extensive degree controls itself through us. And so we have this imperative to create a sustainable future, not only for ourselves, but for all the other life forms on the planet. And it's really important to note that we already have all the technologies we need to restore balance and create that sustainable future. So Paul Hawken is one example. In Project Drawdown, he identified the 100 most substantive existing solutions to address climate change. And climate change is not the only thing. There's many dimensions of this, but I just want to mention this one. So we have the means and the techniques at hand through our last 2 centuries of discovery and innovation. We have all that's needed to be able to roll back global emissions within 30 years. We just need to apply ourselves really intentionally and with great focus and promptly. So in summary, I'm about to complete my sharing of the slides with you. When the female body is honoured, the earth body is honoured, male-female balance is restored. Crete is the shining example of that. We as a species have lived thousands more years in a partnership model than a dominator one. It's so important to remember that. We have for thousands more years, not just a little bit of time. 6 times longer than the lost weekend of patriarchy. Partnership model is associated with prosperity, with peace, with sexual harmony, with connection with nature and actualizing our highest potential. And the resurgence of that partnership model is evident in our current times in all those examples that I gave earlier: the environment movement, the women's movement, the spirituality movement, sustainable technologies, the new economics. Like it's there. It's not yet in government, but it's there at large. And we just need to have the intent and the will for that to come, into those upper echelons. So this is my call to action for you. My intention, so I'm going back to my life mission, which is to restore the sacredness of the female body to the planet. I have this dreams vision. It's not just a dream, it's actually a dream as in what I'm here to do. So my intention, based on that life purpose, is to create this global network of women who are dedicated to living the sacredness of our bodies. I just feel like when we can do that, when enough of us can do that and reach a critical mass and remember who we are as sacred, we can shift the morphogenetic field into greater balance and partnership with our male colleagues. So how? There's 3 ways there I've put up. One is to get my book, Activate Your Female Power. And in the follow-up email that you'll receive tomorrow after the call, you'll get the link to gain access to my book. There's also my online program, which is hosted by Social Chrysalis, which is called Activate Your Female Power. And this is a self-paced 7-module program that you have live access to, where I'm sharing my my love of the female body, also doing some transmissions and some meditations that can support you to activate your female power in that way that I spoke about earlier, which is actualization power. And from now until the 31st of October, there's a $50 discount. The normal price is $197 US. So I don't know what the exact translation of that is to Australian dollars. But there's a $50 discount, and that's the coupon code there, WGWW, when God was a woman 50. So if you jump onto the Social Chrysalis website, find the courses, you'll find that coupon code that you can access until the end of the month. And then there's a private Facebook group, which is for the women who've bought my book or done my program. And I must admit, I'm not much of a Facebook person, but I am making a commitment to show up once a week to read a little snippet and make some comments about my book and engage with that Facebook group. It's not my comfort zone. I'm not a digital native, and I'm not really drawn to Facebook other than to the groups that I really love being part of. So I am going to make a commitment today to show up in the Facebook group once a week with a little snippet from my book and an engagement, doing a Facebook Live. So yeah, and I have the online program is an evergreen, so it's up there as pre-recorded, but I would also love to be able to do monthly get-togethers with this global network of women where we just jump onto a Zoom and share what's happening. And I can do a meditation and share some of this information about Crete, for example, and spark us into our evolutionary potential to remember who we are. So I asked Robert to pop the link to the program, the online program, into the chat box. So hopefully you'll be able to do that. And yes, thank you for listening and being a good audience. And I'll stop my share and come back. And Rebecca, I wanted to ask you, because I know you've been doing my program, it'd be lovely to hear from you what you've gained or what you find most valuable about it.
Sure. Well, what I was thinking is you do a wonderful job of balancing the logic and the information with the feeling in the meditation. So you embody this by balancing the masculine and feminine just the way that you do your program, with both information and just the feeling of it. So I love that. Really have enjoyed understanding just like the spirit and the consciousness behind all of the organs in the female body. And you explained, the original about all the miraculous things about the uterine tubes and the ovaries and all the meaning that we just don't even think about anymore, but it's just so sacred, and how birth was supposed to be orgasmic instead of painful. And that was the original blueprint. And you're like, what happened? So it just really gives you a feel for how sacred it is to be female. And I particularly love the meditation when you talk about, imagine yourself being born in a female body and everybody was just exalted. When you were born, it was just like, all right, a female. And you just, and it's just like, and you can just almost kind of picture yourself rebirthing into that. And, all of us on the call, unfortunately, we're not, birthed into that culture in this lifetime, but we can really go back and, do a redo based on your meditation. So just really have been enjoying the program, and really appreciate all just the dedication and just the amount of research you've done. It's just so well done and so in depth. So thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Rebecca. And I hadn't actually thought about that, excuse me, male-female balance, but it's true. It is true what you're saying there. And it was my intention to not make the program just information. I want it to be a transmission that activates this, right? I'm not here to just talk. I'm here to activate people. I want a network of women who are living this so that we can support each other and tip the scales back to equality and partnership. So that's the completion of what I had to share with you today, but I would really love to hear if there are any questions. I can see that there are some in the Q&A. And if anybody would like to come on, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a question, it could be a comment or an insight or an activation that happened for you when you were listening to what I was sharing.
Yeah, so anyone who wishes to speak, just push the raise your hand button and I'll bring you in to talk. But Sharon, that was phenomenal. There's no question. And I did put the link to your course in the chat. So everyone, please, take a look at that. So, all right, we're going to allow Gerard to come in here and speak.
Oh, good.
Yep.
I better unmute. Well, this is my beloved wife, and I just want to honour her and what she has done today, and to express public to her my full support and devotion to her, and that the partnership we have had has certainly helped me as a man to understand my masculine and feminine balance, and it's something which is very precious, but it's also something which is rather difficult to talk about, because often it's not seen as there's no space to talk about that that intimacy or reflection in parties or wherever in social engagement. So just the fact that this space is here and that I've been able to attend today and to be part of this, and I just wanted to express my honour and devotion and perhaps worship along the line. Thank you.
That's very beautiful, Jared. Are you able to open your video so we can see you?
I
No.
didn't want to cut him off, so I'm bringing him in as a panelist now.
Okay.
So yes, hopefully you'll be able to turn on your video now. Unless if I knocked him off. Yeah, I might have knocked him off.
He's one of these real men that we're envisioning. That used to live and are here now. He's amazing.
Really? It threw me out.
All right,
Yeah.
so here we
Hello.
go.
So anyway, Jared, thank you for your beautiful words. And yes, it's
Oh, there I am.
it is the case that we do live in a partnership model, and some of that is informed by what I learned through my study and research, but part of it's been informed by our living, our life together and our relationships. So thank you for what you said. It's very beautiful.
All right.
I'm wondering if there's any other questions or comments that people would love to hear from the people who've been listening.
So now we're going to bring in Don. Promote Don to panelist as well. So we'll help Don to start his video and audio as well. There we go.
I think.
All right.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Don.
Hi, Don.
Yeah, Sharon, it's always nice to hear you again. I've heard this presentation as part of the Evolutionary Ambassadors, and it was a brilliant presentation. So I just thank you. I wanted to just a comment of some of the thought that I've had, and be interested if you have any comments about it. It seems to me that one of the things we learned that when the sexes were divided and masculine energy, of course, we had masculine and feminine energy in both genders, but more of one than the other. And when they were divided, males received the ability to make millions of sperm a day, and basically had the message of having muscles and power, the love of power, physical muscle, and to go from flower to flower, so to speak, and all short-term kinds of activities. And whereas the female, given the assignment to birth, was obligated for at least 9 months of duty, and then because of having breast, to nurture the child to maturity. So here, just the very nature of our biology required the woman to develop long-term goals and intentions. So here we have the male with physical power and the female with the power of wisdom. And it seems to me that what's going on in the world today, we're divided over the issue of power. We're so tribal because of masculine domination. If you're just in the United States, what's happening in the, for example, in the debates, that it's everything, you have to be red or blue, you have to be on one side or the other. It's true in the whole world. But it just points out the need to bring back the energy of wisdom that the female has that we're neglecting. And that's been going on for such a long time. So I think the message you have is such an important one that we really have to figure out a way to restore the balance of power between masculine physical power and feminine, what I would call feminine wisdom, long-term expectations, whereas the males are not particularly involved with long-term kinds of things. And so we have a world that's so dedicated to short-term pleasure at the expense of long-term pain.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Don. It's certainly, the issue of power is very much at the core, I think, of what we're talking about. And you know, my research, my PhD research was a women's studies project, and women's studies really zones in on what power dynamics are and who has power and so on. So I do think that we have a corrupted notion of power because of what we've been exposed to as power over in the patriarchy, but that's not the only way of exercising power. And so I think it's important, I always come back to the fact that we have lived in a social organization that was based on partnership, and that power was an actualization power, a power with, a power for, and we've done it before and it's possible to do it again. And the only way that's given to me to contribute to that, or one of the ways, is to activate the female power that's inside our bodies with as many women as possible, because that's the kind of benevolence. And, you know, this is not an overnight job. Like, I was born a daughter of the patriarchy, as are we all in this culture. And we have a huge job to unlearn that and unlearn our understandings of power being power over, and not play that game. And it's a tough road to do that, but it's also possible to do. And hence my book and my program and the message that I'm speaking today. It is possible, not just for women to think differently, to experience differently about power, but for men, it's also, like my husband has just shared, his experience of being in partnership with me is enlivening. That was part of our marriage vows to each other, that we would foster growth and expansion and flourishing in one another. And so I'm just holding that vision, and we'll hold it till the day I die, of equal partnership where the power relations are based on mutual respect and not hierarchy. So thank you, Don, for your comments. Always good to be able to have that conversation and get really clear about that as an issue. So I'm wondering if there's any other comments, or if any of you on the panel would like to chime in at this point and make a comment, or any other questions from our listeners.
Yeah, Sharon, I'm going to bring in Suze and promote her to a panelist.
Yay.
Always takes a few seconds. There we go. Whoops. There we go.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi, Suze.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Just really dearly bowing to your devotion, your life's work, and your vision, and your deep, deep embodiment of the actualization, like truly the conduit to such a phenomenal resting place in that remembering. So really, really dearly want to acknowledge you and honor and celebrate, elevate the absolutely stunning, incredible woman that you are. So
Thank you, Suze.
My pleasure. I've been so honored and privileged to be with you, work with you in so many different ways the last few years. And for anyone who hasn't done the course yet, I highly recommend it. Just such a dear homecoming, like really deeply into that love and reverence that we all need reminding about, and so dearly yearn for more in our journey to expand and to contribute in all the ways that we do. So do it if you haven't already. And I would love to share just quickly. I know that that we're on time, but I was really struck today with what you shared and the reminders that came through and the transmission that you brought. There was just such spaciousness in this deep remembering of Crate, and the way that that you shared that we lived, you know, that we all, our consciousness was there, and we have that in our DNA. But that spaciousness to be in the meditations, and that place where, you know, I think it was it Maria's quote you said, is she reminded us that I can't remember if it was the women specifically, but the people of that time, their bodies spoke their own language.
Yes.
So I really felt that that weaving, you know, with that spaciousness, and as you're guiding us through that beautiful home is wow, you know, I mean, how do I put this into words? Is there's such a deep listening, you know, when we can actually sink into that and perhaps, you know, tune in a bit more into our own bodies, you know, where we are now embodied in this lifetime, to actually bring more of that consciousness perhaps into how we choose to live, to breathe, to speak, to walk, to dance, to interact, to communicate, to really dearly see each other. It was, that just felt so super potent. So thank you for bringing that in.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Suze. And you know, like I shared at the beginning, just reading and dwelling with this and letting it take up space in my inner landscape, and looking at the images and kind of getting it, you know, like I've seen that little statue of Minoan snake goddess with her bare breasts and the snakes in her hands many, many times. Especially when I was doing my PhD, but it was always kind of just an artifact back then. And then when I started looking, oh my goodness, this was actually a thing. They used to have this bare-breasted style of dress, and then thinking, well, that can't be right. And then I went looking, and then there's picture after picture after picture of these women with these magnificent gowns and their breasts, and how revered they must have felt. Like, could you imagine walking down the street or going into a church here with our breasts? We would be arrested, right? Prosecuted. How different a social organization and the safety would be in a culture where that was normal and where it was so revered and respected. Like, it's just mind-blowing. And so when I had that moment of aha, I actually saw a vision of myself wearing such a gown, and I was just so lit up. Like, wow, you know, where's my long black hair, and when can I go to the ceremony? I'm ready. You know, it was like present time, felt embodied awareness. So, and that's what you're talking about, Suze, right? And it's also what you teach. You know, Suze is this amazing dance movement sensuality coach that I've had the pleasure to work with. And so she also embodies and remembers this aspect of our humanity as women that just has a beautiful way of being able to support women into that space, me included. So, you know, right back at you, debt of gratitude and an acknowledgement of what you embody as well. Yeah, we were priestesses back in the day, for sure.
Yes, and thank you so much as well. You just in that vein of deep celebrating, you know, everybody that's here and all the ways that we've found the time, energy, and resources to come together and bring that thread from Crate in. You talked about, you used that quote about the power of, was it complementing, we double the power, or
Yes. Yes.
when we complement one another, the power is doubled.
Yes.
So we know the electromagnetics that we live in, and the energy of where we choose to attune and to focus, that, you know, there's a place where we know that is generated. But I was so reminded as well, and perhaps with the you know, in the frame of evolution, and it dropped in for whatever reason, but I was reminded of Nelson Mandela and how, you know, in his time of really bringing South Africa back together, he really lived and breathed this philosophy of Ubuntu.
Yes.
And so the place of Ubuntu is, I am because we are. I am because of you. And because you see me, I can be me. And we're here together in that place. So yeah, may we always keep celebrating each other and finding all the places that have been separate into greater harmony.
Thank you, Sue. It's very beautiful and very apt too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Love you.
So,
I would like, oh, sorry.
yes, go, Barbara.
I just wanted people to know, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I haven't taken Sharon's whole course, but I have browsed through it. And you, in taking this course with her, you get her. She leads you. She talks you through this. This is not reading material. She is there with you, taking you on guided meditations, right? Is this true?
Yes,
You're fully present there.
It's pre-recorded, but there's something like 92 videos, and in each module, at the end of the module, there's a series of videos about whatever that particular aspect is, and then there's a meditation along the lines of what I've done today, where you get a chance to really drop in and have that. It's not just knowledge, it is knowledge, it's wisdom, but also an activation of your own evolutionary potential, so that you get to embody your female power, because it's what we need to do. It's so what we need to do.
Yeah, so, you know, so there's a book which you can read, which is one thing, but being there with her for all of that time is quite extraordinary.
Thank you, Barbara. Any final comments from anybody in our participants before we complete?
Not at the moment, but anyone please, you know, add. Here you go. Walter, you want to speak? Yeah.
I do. I want to talk a little bit and get your perspective on the word partnership, because I find myself taking modern day definitions. A partnership is two people. And I don't think that necessarily was the case. There may not have even been marriage. Barbara and I have a 30-year-old son, and he quite frequently talks about groups of 100 people who were roaming the earth, and that everybody was the father of the child, because the men and women copulated freely, so you didn't have a partner in that sense, and so nobody knew who the father was. Obvious who the mother was, but not the father. And my guess is that partnerships were larger, and that it wasn't a pairing up. Do you have any comment about that, or any evidence one way or the other?
I don't have any specific evidence about, you know, marriage, other than that it was matrilineal, so the lineage passed down through the female line. When I'm talking about partnership, I'm speaking about in the way that Riane Eisler talks about a partnership model of social organization. So instead of it being a dominator model where you've got male power over female power, or female power over male power, you have an assumption of equal partnership between men and women, and that would be in government, that would be in resources, that would be in every sphere of life. So I don't know what it meant in terms of their intimate daily, you know, marital status or those kinds of things, but it seems like it's a given that how they do things is in partnership, and I'm sure they would have had their process and ways of doing that, you know, like there was somewhere that I read that in one of the cities in Crete had something like 100,000 people. That's a lot of people to get fed and clothed and the water and the resources and so on. But they did it somehow or other. They had a way of being able to do it in comparative harmony. And the partnership model is specifically referred to with gender between male and female. There's this partnership model, so not hierarchy. So it's probably not an in-depth answer to the question, Walter, but is something that I could look into further to see if I can find anything more. Be good to know. So we're almost at our time, and I'd love to hear any final comments from any one of you on the panel, what your takeaway is today. And
exactly, this is great, and I'm not seeing anyone else in chat raise their hand, but I wanted to, say, Sharon, that I have 3 daughters, right? And I would have loved them to have this information growing up. Now, great, I can get this to them now. But are you seeing this being introduced in any education, facilities? And if not, how do we get it there, or what do we need to do? How do we spread this more?
Yes, good question. I haven't seen it in any educational places, and I just think it so needs to be known. Even in, ancient history classes, it's usually taught from quite a patriarchal perspective. And so the presence of the goddess is downplayed as some kind of fertility figurine or pagan ritual or whatever. The actual archaeological evidence is not usually taught, to my awareness, in schools. As to how we get it in there, your guess is as good as mine. Maybe we can show them this video and get them to think about how they can shape their curriculum. I would love my book to be on the curriculum for young girls. I think it would be so helpful for them to know their bodies and to know the ownership of their own power as they're growing up. So, yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, and I do have attendee who wants to speak, so we're going to promote them to a panelist and let them speak here.
Right.
Right. So we're unmuting you at the moment. There we go.
Hi, Samantha.
Hi, Sharon. How are you? Oh, is my video off? Hold on.
There you go.
There we go.
So good to hear your talk and see more about what you are promoting. And I wanted to just share, there's 2 things, also to comment to what Rob was saying, but I wanted to share that feeling that most of the women spoke about here today about the meditation allowing me to really drop into such a open presence. And it really, I felt like what you said before about bringing that idea of it being in the past instead of the future into today is very empowering.
Yes.
And I really felt like I could be more here. I could be, I felt my posture change and everything.
Yes. It's wonderful.
Amazing.
I'm so good.
Yes.
So good. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, so thank you. It was very real for me. And Rob, what you were saying about introducing it into schools, actually the next call that I'm going to have is with somebody to bring this kind of thing into early childhood, in starting off with how to introduce the goddess into story form, and getting them to connect with the changes and growing up and what the female body is. And I also just wanted to share the work of Jane Bennett.
Yes,
who-
I know Jane. I know Jane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she does Celebration Day for Girls.
Yes.
And so that's an amazing way to introduce some of this work to younger girls and teenagers
Yes.
going into the new
Yes.
phase of life. Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Samantha. I know Jane. Yes, she and I have had many conversations. So, and I'm really happy to hear that you got the activation. That's what my intention was in doing those meditations. So it's great to hear that. But thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your input and for coming on. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, so everyone, I want to thank you all for attending and sharing wonderful presentation, and panelists, thank you for being here with us. Now, next time, mark your calendars, November 18th is our next roundtable with Rebecca, and we're going to be talking about Find Your Higher Purpose. She's going to bring in many other experts to talk about this, so it should be really great. But everyone, remember, get Sharon's book, get her course, and let's start sharing it with the world. All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming.
Thank
Bye-bye
you.
now.
Thank you all. Bye.